On Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis, we began the sugya of Katan. So if you count up from the bottom of Ayin Beis Amid Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines up. Omer Rav Huna, Katan Rodev Nitan Latzilo Binash. So Rav Huna says that you're allowed to kill the Rodev even though he's a Katan. Now, we had many indications that the halach of a rodev is what we call a chiyuv misa. For example, the Gemara says, can we kill the rodev on Shabbos when we have a principle that ein onshim b'Shabbos? We don't put someone to death on Shabbos. That's derived from lo savaru eish. But we established also that Bob Machteres has the din of rodev, if you remember. Now, on top of that, the Gemara has a havamina that if you can't kill the rodef with saif, then don't kill him at all. And some Rishonim say maskana, if all things are equal, ideally you should be killing him with saif, which is the chiyuv misa of Bezdin in the case of a rotzeach. Thirdly, the Gemara says about Baba Machteres that if he breaks kalim, he doesn't pay damages for the kalim. Or according to Rav, even if he takes the kalim and there's still the end. And the reason for that is what? Kimle b'derabin. I mean, Kimle b'derabin means that a chiyuv misa knocks off a chiyuv mama. So that's another indication that rodef is chayav misa. But in the case of a katan, l'chora, our whole thesis goes down the tubes. But last week we suggested the possibility that perhaps there are two categories of a chiyuv misa. There's a chiyuv misa b'toras onesh, and there's a chiyuv misa, which is simply the Torah in its divine, infinite wisdom decreed a chiyuv misa, even without an onesh. It means that for the sake of hatzolas hanirdav, the Torah established that the rodef is chiyuv misa. Now you'll ask me, okay, you've stripped the chiyuv misa of the element of onesh. And that definitely makes life easier for me when you talk about a katan, because a katan is a lav bar onshin. But nevertheless, I'm still wondering whether you can have any chiyuv on a katan. For example, can a katan have a maisa hamachayev, let's say in Ezekiel? So last week, if you recall, we quoted the Hagos Hoshri in Perek HaChovel, who bases himself on the Rosh, that there is a halacha of paying for a hezek that was implemented, that was done by a katan when he becomes a gadol. As long as a katan, we can't take him to Bezdin. But the Gemara says that Rav Ashi forced Rafram to pay a malva for the shtar that he burnt when he was a katan, when Rafram became a gadol. And you see, clearly says the Rosh that there's a chiyuv mamon even for a katan. And you and I would have said a katan is a lav bar maisa. The Torah doesn't recognize his maisa. But as Reb Chaim used to say over and over again, a katan is capable of a maisa. And as a result, he is mechuyev to pay for a maisa hezek. And that's a chiyuv that's imposed upon a mazik because of his Maisa Hezek. Reb Chaim wanted to go just far and not too far. And he said as far as Chovel b'chaveru, and we know that a Chovel is chayiv in 5 categories of chiyuv mamon, there Reb Chaim says he can't impose that chiyuv on a katan. A katan is not chayiv for chavola. That's why the Gemara says that Giyasan Ra, that if a katan is chovel, you can't collect that money. And the Rambam seems to indicate in Hilchos Chovel Mazik that the chiyuv tashlumei chavola is not a regular compensation halacha. It's not a chiyuv mamon, but rather it's a chiyuv knas, and it's an onesh for the act of assault of chavola. So Chaim would say the following: Enoch hinami, the Maisa Katan is recognized as a Maisa. When we're going to be mechayev him for that Maisa, he's chayev. We may have to wait a while until he's a gadol to be tovem and bezdin. But if, on the other hand, you're talking about a chiyuv onshim, then adkan, then a katan could not have a chiyuv onshim. And now we ask the question, according to Rav Huna, here on Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis, that a katan or rodef achar chavero nitan lahargo, is that a chiyuv misa, like a chiyuv mammon, but without an onesh? Or is it just hatzolas hanirdaf? We got to save the nirdaf's life. Now, clearly, from the perspective of saving the nirdaf's life, then even though the katan is the one who's, shall we say, jeopardizing the life of another person, nevertheless, we would save the nirdaf at the expense of the life of the rodef. But now we're going a step further, and in the light of all our proofs, we have 3 proofs that rodef is chayav misa. We're going to say that a katan, according to Rav Huna, is a rodef who's chayav misa, albeit not b'toras what? A chiv onshim, but rather a chiv misa for the misa of being a rodef. And then afkamina here will be awesome, because as the Gemara says over here, kasavar,
you wouldn't have kamalei v'drabim, maybe. If it's not an onesh, maybe you wouldn't have kamalei.
Excellent question. So that's the Mishnah with the other Hagol Sashri, not the Hagol Sashri we quoted from Achovil, but Hagol Sashri in Perek HaKones, where the Mishnah says that Amad L'Kedisha Shal HaChavero, right, is B'Shabbos is Potter, she came B'Schai B'Nafsho, and Hagol Sashri says that that's because a mazik is subject to Dini Onshim, and therefore will apply the principle of Mishum Risha Achas Tomachayev, Via Tomachayev Mishum Shtei Rishoyos. But the Gemara now says a tremendous nafkamina. It says, Kasavar Rodef Eino Tzarech Hasra. That apparently Rav Huna holds, and it's going to be a machlokes in the Gemara 2 days, whether a Rodef needs Hasra. Loshna Gadol V'Loshna Katan. In other words, if, according to Rav Huna, we put the cotton to death as a Rodef, then it means that a rodef doesn't require asra. If a rodef of a gadol required asra, then it would be impossible to classify a katan as a rodef, because a katan clearly is not subject, doesn't lend himself to a hasra. From the fact that we apply the principle of rodef and the chiyuv rodef, even though he's a katan and he's not capable of getting asra, we see that rodef is chayav misa even without asra. Now, I understand very well that a rodef would be chayav misa without a asra if you hold that a rodef is hatzolas hanirdo. If basically the halacha fundamentally of a rodef is pikuach nefesh, let's save the life of the nirdav, then what difference does it make whether you gave him asra or you didn't give him asra? Even in the absence of asra, you have the same pikuach nefesh that tells you, for the sake of saving the nirdav, you kill the rodef. Well, he gave up real quick. Okay, it doesn't matter. So that we understand very well that the reason why we waive the requirement of asra in the case of a rodef is because we're going to kill the rodef in order to save the life of the nirdav, so we don't need asra. But what happens according to the Mandi Amar, who says that you need a hasra for the rodef? It must be that according to that Mandi Amar, the chiyuv of a rodef is a chiyuv bisa, and if it's a chiyuv bisa, you need a hasra. So we assume now that according to Rav Huna, the chiyuv rodef is not based on
saving the nirdav.
No, fakir, it's just the opposite. The chiyuv rodef is not based on a chiyuv bisa, because then we would require asra. But in the light of what we're saying, it could be that Rav Huna agrees that rodef is not just a matter of hatzolas hanirdav, and therefore we waive the requirement of asra. But even afilun timsa lomar, that a rodef is chayiv bisa, we don't need asra, because this chiyuv bisa is a unique chiyuv bisa. It's not a chiyuv bisa b'toras onshim, and then we would require asra to let the accused know exactly what the law requires of him, what the implications of his actions are. But he has a new chiyuv bisa, that because of the nirdav situation, we're going to be chayiv bisa to the rodef. But it's not a chiyuv bisa b'toras onshim. If it's not a chiyuv misa b'toras onshim, we don't need hasra. So I'm suggesting now that at the end of the day, it's very possible that Rav Huna operates with the following definition, namely that rodef is chiyuv misa, but not a chiyuv misa b'toras onshim. That would be impossible in the case of a katan, but a chiyuv misa b'toras rodef with a new din of save the nirdaf because the rodef is chiyuv misa, and that can apply even to a katan. And once you assume, and I'm going to finish one more sentence, and then the floor is yours, Dava. Then once you assume that the chiyuv of a rodef is a chiyuv misa without an element of onshim, so it's not for the ma'isa avera, but just simple for the ma'isa redifa. If that be the case, then even a katan is considered a rodef, and not only that, a rodef doesn't need asra. And when the Gemara derives from Rav Huna that a rodef doesn't need asra, it means despite the fact that the yisodas v'shoresh avoda of a rodef is that he's chayiv misa, nevertheless it's a different kind of chayiv misa. And it's a unique chayiv misa which does not require asra. And again, you might ask me, Rabbi Person, why are you pushing this agenda here? Over and over again, you're hacking away. Yeah, it's a chayiv misa. And even Rav Huna says a katan is a rodef and he's chayiv. It's a chayiv misa. Why? What moves you? And the answer is those three proofs that we quoted before. The fact that maybe a rodef is not killed on Shabbos, the fact that a rodef has to be killed with what? With Sayev, and the fact that there's Kimlev in the Rabbi in the case.
I mean, a rodef can be showing you also, not actually, but a guy loses control of his car and he heads a big crowd.
But how do you know that? You only know that from Rav Huna. I'm telling you, if not for Rav Huna, if a person somehow circumstance beyond his control, it became a rodef. That's going to be called, we'll get to it in just a minute, min hashamayim karad fileh. And if it's min hashamayim karad fileh, like the case of an ubar b'mei imo, where you can't kill the ubar because, again, Yotzar Rosha, we'll get to it in a minute, because min hashamayim karad fileh. But Rav Huna is saying no. Rav Huna is saying that we can kill a katan as a rodef. Oh, if we can kill a katan as a rodef, now you're right, that even in the case of shogeg, we could put him to death. Right. Unless it fits into the category of min hashamayim karad fileh. But again, we're going to have to rack our brains and figure out what the Gemara means by min hashamayim karad fileh.
Isn't there a whole stencil on the road, on the...
A whole what?
There's a whole Chaim.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get to Reb Chaim tonight. Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to work through the sugya, but maybe we'll get to Reb Chaim another time. After Kabbalah HaTorah on Shavuos, then we can get to Reb Chaim. But let me ask you a question. Are you ready for a question?
Yeah.
You are?
Well,
okay.
Give us another few minutes.
Here's what I want to ask you. You know that a katan ben tes is a bar hachi of BIyun, and the Torah, the halacha recognizes BIyun. What would be the halacha of a katan harodef achara erva laonser? What do I mean? The halacha is that a rodef applies even not only in the case of Ritzicha, where the rodef is running after someone that needs to kill him, but even in the case of a rodef achara erva, we kill the rodef if need be. What about a katan? He's a ben tes. I think it would depend upon our two definitions. If we're going to say that in the case of a rodef achara erva laonsa, he's a rodef because he deserves a chiyuv misa b'toras onesh, then it doesn't apply to a katan. But if you're going to argue that a katan is chayiv misa as a rodef according to Rav Huna, simply because of the ma'aser redifa, and therefore we consider achara erva li'onsa as a ma'aser redifa, then I would say that we can kill the katan according to Rav Huna, even in the case where he's rodef achara erva, because it's not a chiyuv misa b'toras onesh, but rather it's a separate chiyuv misa. And if he has the ma'aser redifa and a ma'aser of bias erva, then we should put him to death. Okay. Eisvei Rav Chisda Rav Huna. Rav Chisda is going to attack Rav Huna from the case of an Uber. And this is a Mishnah in the 7th parak of Masechet Olos. Have you learned Olos?
That mission.
I once tried to learn Olos for a yahrzeit in 30 days. I barely scratched the surface.
No,
40% of Reb Chaim's Chidushim are on Olos, and the Radzina Rebbe wrote a whole sefer on Olos. Olos is extremely complicated and very long as well. But anyway, we're going to fast forward to the 7th parak of Olos.
yeah, that's often quoted because,
His own parak, he says at the beginning, nobody really knows what the parak is talking about. So I'm just gonna.
but this mission is quoted often because in discussions of medical.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you, if you want to study Judaic morality, this is a good place to study. And contrast it with some of the other religions. Yotza Rosho, Ein Nogin Bo, Lefisha Ein Dochim Nefesh Mipnei Nefesh. The Ubar, through the process of birth, is endangering the life of its mother. And that means that the Uber is a rodef. Again, you and I would say, how can an Uber be a rodef? And an Uber is not responsible for its actions. But we've already seen that a katan who's a lav bar onshim, he's not responsible. He's not punished for his actions. And yet, Rav Huna considers him to be a rodef. And Rav Huna waives the requirement of asra. And the Gemara argues that if a katan is a rodef according to Rav Huna, then an Uber should be a rodef according to Rav Huna. And the Gemara is sort of challenging our minds, and this is Rav Chisda, to come up with some distinction between a katan and an ubar. And yet, when you look at it on the surface of it, they're identical. In both cases, you're talking about a ma'aser redifa without a chiv onshin. And if Rav Huna will postulate a din rodef without onshin, without a ma'aser vera per se, in the case of a katan, so there's no onshin, there's no ma'aser vera, and yet we're going to kill him to save the nirdav, which may be a chiv misa of some sort, then why not apply that to the ubar, whose existence through the birth process is endangering the life of its mother? Now, the truth is that we're only looking at half of the Mishnah in Olos, the Sefer. The Reisha addresses the case of an Uber before it was Motzi es Rosha. So, for example, let's open up the Rambam in Hilchos Rotzeach, if you happen to have it. Perek Aleph Halacha Tes. And the Rambam here in Perek Aleph presents the halacha of a Rodev, and he tells us that a Rodef is chayav even without hasra. He tells us that there's a separate lav in the Torah of Lo Tachos Einecha. Harezu mitzvos lo saseh shelo lachos al nefesh harodef. You know, somebody might say,
Which parak?
we're in Perek Aleph Milchus Rotzeach Halacha Tes.
Okay.
It's unclear exactly where Halacha Tes begins, the different girsos in the Rambam, but if you see here in the Frankel edition, he says, Harezu mitzvos lo saseh shelo tzachos al nefesh harodef. So that is sort of like the Rambam's sum total of everything he said before. You know, a person might be standing on the sidelines and he say, you know what? Why should I kill this guy to save this guy? Let me just not involve it. Mind my own business. Yeah, so the Rambam says you violate a law in the Torah. Lo tachus al nefesh harodef. Lefichach. Now, what does the word lefichach indicate? That we're still in the parsha of what? Of Rodef, correct? Leficha. Horu chachamim, interesting language, which you have to study. Sha'ubra, which means the mother who's giving birth. Shema kasha lele. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Mutar lachtocha ubar b'meyeha. It's kind of gory here. Bein b'sam, bein b'yad, b'nei shehu kirodef achrea leharga.
There's a din in Rodeo.
Yeah, it's a din of rodef.
in Russian.
And then the Rambam goes on to say that after Hotzias Rosh, but I want to focus on the Reisha of the Rambam, because here the Rambam is quoting the first part of the Mishnah Olos, which we don't have in our text. And not only that, he's putting the first part of the Mishnah into a context. And that we don't have. The Mishnah just says that Chotchim is a Ubar, etc. But the Mishnah doesn't say why we destroy the Ubar. Now, if you look at Rashi here in the Masechet Sanhedrin, take a look at Rashi, Dibra Maskil Yotza Rosha, which in the wide lines, you'll count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the wide lines. You have it?
Be'isha.
Be'isha makasha leled umesukenes uktani reisha. What's Rashi doing for us now? He's giving us the reisha. The Gemara omitted the reisha. Hachaya poshetes yada. Why? Because the isha is misukenes. V'chodchaso umotziaso levarin. Yeah, very gory description here. But look at the next 5 words in Rashi. More than 5 words. The kol zman shelo yotza le'avir ha'olam lav nefesh. Please underline those 3 words. Lav nefesh.
It's not because of Rodeh, it's because it's not a person.
It is a rodef or it's not a rodef? Not a rodef.
Not a
Excellent. Rabbosai, Rashi, and the Rambam are coming from 2 different perspectives. The Mishnah tells us that if lo yatzal li'aver olam, then chodchasko umotzi ivar mevar. But the Mishnah doesn't tell you why. And Rashi offers one answer to why, and the Rambam offers a totally different answer. And honestly, I'm more excited about the Rambam's answer because I think it leads to our Gemara and the kasha on Rav Huda. Rav Huda is saying that we have a Mishnah here that addresses the issue of Rodef. And guess what? The Mishnah in the Sefer is going to tell me that Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh, we cannot take the life of the Uber after it pops its head out. And now Rav Chisda yells and screams, but wait a minute, what about the law of Rodef? And you're going to tell me, well, an Uber is not responsible, so what a cotton's not responsible. But I understand that this whole Mishnah in Olos is to be put into a context, a background of what? Of Rodef, which is the Rambam insists on that. Rashi is saying a whole nother story. Rashi is saying, you know why we're going to kill the Rodef? You know why you're going to kill the Ubar? Because Lav Nefesh. He's not a Nefesh.
When Rashi, you understand the difference between whether the head came out or didn't come out.
Correct.
Rambam is much more difficult.
Correct, but the Gemara is going to try to deal with that. I mean, according to Rashi, the whole issue is here whether he's an nefesh or not an nefesh. So I understand very well that Yotzer Rosho is a nefesh, and ain't Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. But I don't understand why Rav Chisda is going through this painstaking shaklavitaria in understanding the Sefer of the Mishnah. Well, isn't the Uber a Rodef? And therefore, even after Yotzer Rosho, which would be killing him, he did Rodef, according to Rav Huna. And the whole Mishnah, according to the Rambam at least, is talking about Rodef, Dini Rodef. So there's a Din Rodef. And for some reason, after Yotzer Rosho, there's no Din Rodef. And that's a kash on Rav Huna, says Rav Chisda. But Rashi's talking about a whole different story. Rashi wants to know, what's the status of an Ubar?
Yeah, I think according to the Rambam, the question is very difficult because according to the Rambam, the Mishnah proves that it couldn't be a rodef. The fetus is a rodef even before the hit comes out. So Lokoshakin, an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old who's running efforts to kill him, Lokoshakin is a rodef.
So why is Yotzer Rosho not a rodef?
Okay,
so again, but isn't that geschmack that Rav Chisda's kasha fits like a glove into the context of the Mishnah in Olos? How can you tell me that there's a din of Rodef, and then you're going to drop the din of Rodef in the case of Yotzer Rosho? So again, that whole discussion is the shaklavitaria between Rav Chisda and Rav Huna. But according to Rashi, what?
On the equal thing, I'm saying you have 2 equal parties here. you're answering this from Shemai, because maybe the mother is the rodefet of the child once the child's head is out.
Good,
So
good,
it's
good.
not-
Domino, we're gonna have to address all these questions, but you're a light year ahead of me. We're lagging way behind you. I'm trying to understand Rashi. Let's focus our attention on 3 words in Rashi. Rashi says lav nefesh.
It makes perfect sense. That's why the Gemara does not, who's asking the question, Rav Chizkiah? Rav Chizkiah does not need the Reisha, because the Reisha has nothing to do with Rodef. The Reisha is not.
David, are
relate to our
you
discussion at
willing
all.
to defend Rashi?
Yes.
That an
No,
Uber is
that's
not,
not-
wait, no. Now I got you. Okay?
That Uber is not an effort.
That an Uber is not an nefesh. The Mishnah says in Yuma that if
In the Chal Shabbos thing.
that if a woman is pregnant and she smells on Yom Kippur some very good stuff that's called Asa Bulbis, the Gemara says we'll give Machal Shabbos, because if she doesn't eat, then the Uber is going to die. We give Machal Yom Kippur because we have to save the Uber. What's Rashi going to say?
Same sofa.
No. Very simple, Rabbi said. What's Rashi going to say? We're going to be Machal Yom Kippur not to save the Uber, but to save the mother. And that's a gigantic machlokus rishonim at the end of Masechet Yuma on Pei Beis.
Does Rashi actually say that there? That'd be Rashi that's Tosfos.
I don't know. We have to check the Rashi out. It's really a Tosis in Masechet Yuma. It's Tosis in Masechet Nida. And Tosis in many places asks whether we're Machal Shabbos in order to save the life of an Uber. But Rashi now, I think, is cornered. He's boxed into a corner. The South Africans use that term, boxed into a corner. All right, you've been hanging around America, so you probably picked it up. Rashi has his back against the wall. Obviously, Rashi is going to be committed to the sense that if the Uber is not a nefesh, we can't violate the Shabbos. The Torah has pikuach nefesh, but not an Uber who's not a nefesh. But I have another kasha for you, David, if you're defending Rashi. The Gemara says earlier in Sanhedrin that Akum Shaharag es Uber is Chayav Misa. Well, what are you talking about? An Uber is not a nefesh. And not only that, but the Gemara here says the reason why we don't kill the Uber is because before it pops its head out, it's not a rodef. After it pops its head out, it is a rodef. And the Gemara therefore asks the kasha, well, did I say it the wrong way? Maybe I'll say it again. Before it pops its head off, it's a rodef. After it pops its head off, it's not a rodef. And the Gemara therefore objects, well, Rav Huna, why isn't the Uber a rodef? But you see clearly from the Gemara that the Gemara is working hard to try to see why we don't kill the Uber. And the Gemara is saying we don't kill the Uber because it's not a rodef after it pops its head out. But the Gemara is not going to tell you, well, you know what? It's not a nefesh at all. But the Gemara is going from the beginning to the end with the question of whether or not the Uber is a rodef. And the Gemara is saying, I don't understand. Why do you kill the Uber before it pops its head out as a rodef? And then all of a sudden, the Uber pops its head out and it's no longer a rodef. But according to Rashi, it's not even a nefesh. Very, very difficult, Rashi. And I'm thinking out loud, what would be, according to Rashi, if, again, I don't want to get too dramatic here, but let's say, I'm going to say it in a general way, because I don't want to get into this whole issue of abortion. But let's say you have someone who's about to kill an Uber. What would you say according to Rashi?
Goy is Chayav Misa for this.
Yeah, but Rashi is saying that he's not an Uber. I'm sorry, he's not a nefesh. If he's not a nefesh, how could you kill a rodef after an Uber is trying to kill an Uber when he's not even a nefesh?
Maybe you have to say it like this. The Torah uses the phrase "elo damim." If the Maisa Radifa neutralizes his identity as a nefesh, according to Rashi. The Maisa Radifa neutralizes his identity as a nefesh. Elo damim, you see him as a force, not as a neshama.
Again, the Rashi is not talking about, a rodef and a Maisa Radifa. Rashi says, "Kol zman shelo yotza liyavra olam lam nefesh."
Yeah, so he can't.
And
I'm
by the
back
way,
into
there are
not saying-
shittas and rishonim.
You're forced not to say it that way. you have to say
No,
that Rashi isn't saying it in the context of Radifa, otherwise there's no answer to you.
But apple can be killed for much less. An apple was still food. I mean,
Correct.
the thing on apple is not really.
Correct. So Rashi's going to say the following: that if Reuven is trying to kill an ubar of Leah, right, we can't kill Reuven. And I'll tell you something else. This is a question that came up in the technology of science. You know that today there's something called stem cells. Now I don't know where this is going. I mean, it could go very far. But let me ask you a question. Forget about stem cells. Maybe I shouldn't confuse you because I don't know beans about stem cells. But let's say we can kill an ubar to save a human being. What would Rashi say about
So
it?
if you're taking Rashi literally, you have to say, yeah, that's cool.
That's what we have to do because an uber is not a nefesh. If I can save a
The
nefesh,
Mishnah says that. The Mishnah says you see killed over to save human being.
I don't remember the
The
Mishnah.
mother,
The Mishnah we're talking
the
about.
Ohalos,
If you save it, if you
Because
kill
that's
over to
because
save
it's a
the
road
mother, why shouldn't you come to save somebody
because
else?
that's it's a road date. That's
No,
she's
no.
talking about the context of
Again.
Much later, something now.
Rashi's operating within the context of Radifa. You have to say that.
What are you saying again, David? Say one more time. That
If you
according
kill the
to
Uber to save the mother, why not kill the Uber to save somebody else?
no, so that I don't think you're right.
Because
I think we're
because he's a road date, that's what you could kill to save the mother. To kill to save somebody else, he's not a road date, so you can't kill him.
Okay.
Or the other person being.
I think David is taking Rashi to his logical conclusion. He's saying, let's kill the road. I'm sorry, let's kill the Uber to save a human life.
No.
So in the Mishnah, he's a road date.
No, the Mishnah you can interpret like
If
the
somebody
Rambam.
else is sick and he needs
Yeah.
something from the Uber, the
Let's
Uber
read the
isn't a
Rambam
road
again.
date.
So, I don't want you to think I invented the Rambam. The Rambam says, Horu Chachamim Leficha, meaning after the lav of Lotachus al Nefesh HaRodeh, is how Uber Shei Makasha Lele Mutal Mipnei Shukarodi Vachrel Laharka. I mean, it's about as outspoken as you
You're
can.
saying in the case where a guy says, I'm gonna kill Pliny unless you abort that fetus. That's the case you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I thought maybe you could take something out of the body of the Uber to save a human being. That's what I was. But you're right.
That's a show. The Mishnah Ohalos is
Rashi's saying
only
that an Uber
the
is not an
Mishnah in
I mean,
Ohalos is only when the Uber is a road date. You can't go beyond that.
Again, that's the Rambam sheet, but you have to give credit to Rashi. And not only that, the Rishonim will say that we will not be Machal Shabbos or Yom Kippur to save an Uber. I mean, Tosanida says such a thing. There's a day in Tosas in Yuma. I mean, it's not that there are no Rishonim who would agree with Rashi. There are Rishonim who would say that an Uber is not an effort. Okay. Let me leave this for a moment and let's see if we can read the Gemara's answer. Again, Eisvei Rav Chizda Rav Huna Yotza Rosh Ein Nogel Fi Shein Dochen Nefesh Le'Nava Mai Rodefu Shiny Hasam Demishamaya Paradfi. What would you say, Ramosa?
If not for the Rambam, I would say what Gemara is saying is that the baby is not making a conscious decision
Oh,
to
excellent.
run after the mother. It's just the case of
Excellent. You
Rav Huna.
can't call someone a rodef if he doesn't have ruts on. At least the katan to some extent made a decision.
It's an awareness.
So it's mirtzono. He has a certain level of awareness. The Uber is not aware at all. Minashamai karatfi. It's derech hateva. It's the teva that's stepping in and creating a situation where the Uber's life endangers the life of the mother. That's not a rodef.
You can't say that to the Rambam. The Rambam holds that.
Again, the Rambam is going to be very difficult right now at this point, but at least I understand the Mahalach HaSugya in and of itself. But perhaps Rabbosai, we could say something else. The Rambam says that Mishahotzi Rosho ein nogibo she'ein dochin nefesh b'nei nefesh v'zeu tivo shel olam. So Rambam says two things here. First of all, ein dochin nefesh b'nei nefesh, which means that in terms of Hatzalah, I can't choose one life over the other. And the Uber is already born, Al Pitin, he's a Yalud. But the Rambam says something else. Why isn't the Uber a Rodef? Zeu Tivo Shel Olam. So David says very well, maybe the Rambam means Zeu Tivo Shel Olam, that he has no Rotz. But then we're going to have to say that a cotton does have Rotz. So I would say, Lefiani is Daiti, that Zeu Tivo Shel Olam means something else. That a Rodef has to have a Maisa Redifa. Is it time for my ready? No, you got me scared. I'm so unaware of time. Do you hear what I'm suggesting? We need a Maisa Redifa. What the Rambam is saying is that a Katan is a Maisa Redifa. He's running after someone to kill him. The Uber is being thrust. That's called Tivo Shalom. The Uber is totally passive.
Like a plant, it's nature.
Nature is pushing the Uber out of its mother's womb and endangering the life of its mother.
So why is it a rodef before the head comes out?
It's still a question.
Before the head comes out, the Rambam says, right, Leficha.
So let me ask you a question. Does the Rambam call the Uber b'mei imo a rodef?
No, we went back from the Leficha, right?
Well, you're right. But what would be the diuk to say that the Uber is not a rodef? One extra letter in the Rambam. Excellent.
I mean, I don't know.
The Chafadimyon. The Rambam says Kirodef. Now again, I'm not yet sure what the Rambam means by Kirodef, but one thing I'm certain, the Rambam is worried about our kasha. How could it be that Zeu Tivo Shel Olam is mafkia the status of a rodef, and yet at the same time the Uber B'mei Imo is considered rodef? So the Rambam adds the Chafadimyon Kir Rodef. We would have to see what the loveness of the Rambam is and why we kill the Uber Kir Rodef. Okay, but leave that on the side. I want to ask the following question. Would the Rambam agree in the context of Tivo Shel Olam, which is the Rambam's interpretation of Min Shamayim Karad Filani, that a passive Rodef is not a rodef because there's no Meiser and Dif. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, if you happen to have this other Rambam, which is called Sefer Shoftim, you know what? Let's leave Sefer Shoftim. Let's stick to the Nezikim for another few minutes because I don't want to jump the gun. Let's open up the Hilchos Chovel Umaz. Perek Ches. 1 second. This is a very, very famous Rambam. And we'll see how the Rav deals with this Rambam. So we're in Perek Ches Halacha Tesvav. One second. Oh. It's actually the last Rambam in Hilchos Chovel Umaz. Yeah, we have it?
Mm-hmm.
Svina shechoshva li shover mikoved amas. Sounds like Sefer Yomi, right? Anyway, the Svina is about to be capsized. Is that how you say it in English?
Mm-hmm.
It's about to go down, down, down. What was the name of that submarine that sunk? What was it? 25 years ago. Dakar, right? Dakar. So why is this Svina going down? Koved amas. One of the members of the Sfina, I don't know if he's a crew member, if he's a captain, or he's just a rank and file guy. The Hekel Mimasa, the Hishlich Bayam, and we're now in the Zikin, and the Ram wants to know, is this a Maisa Hesek for which he has to compensate the owner of the Masa? Potter. Now, why is he potter? I would have said, okay, he's potter because he was honest, on Patre, but the trouble is that other so the Rambam, he's potter because he killed a rodef. I would never have said such a thing. Don't blame Berzon for this. The Rambam says it. It's for Rabba. Asa, sheshlich Moshiach. The Ram is saying that all the mitzvahs are, right? There's a double mitzvah in Rodef. There's a mitzvah to kill the Rodef to save the Nirdaf, and there's a los haseh, lo tachos al nefesh Rodef. And the Ram is going to throw that all in here. And since he's doing a mitzvah, we should be giving him credit for coming forward and doing the mitzvah. Because he's like a Rodef. Who's a Rodef? I don't see a Rodef
The
here.
Ma'aser
The Masa is a Rodef.
The Ma'aser doesn't require das. It could be a thing.
Not only das, Moshe, it doesn't even require what? A Ma'aser Redifa. There's no human being here. It's an inanimate object. There's no Ma'aser Redifa. And the Ravid is very bothered by this Ram. Why? Because he says that the Rambam contradicts himself. Let's go back to Halacha Dal in the same chapter. Nasa, now it's a little tricky. The word Nasa in Halacha Dalin does not mean the word Masa or Masui in Halacha Tesva. Masui means a heavy weight. Nasa means to lift something and give it in this context to someone else. Nasa moment chaver biyado. He lifts up the moment of his friend. V'nasna la'anos. Now let's understand a little bit of history here, right? The government, the Goyish government, is called the anos. They used to take taxes, and they had something that they wanted. If they had something they wanted from a Jew, especially, they got it, because otherwise they threatened to kill you. So comes along Ploni Almoni. He's not the owner of this mammon, and he offers that mammon to the anos, to the government. Sokta Ramo chayiv l'shalim mikol makom. Af al pi shamelech onsa lahavi. Says the Ravid, I don't get the difference. This mammon, which has been specified by the anos, this is what I want. I want this diamond ring, or whatever it is. That diamond ring now becomes a rodef, according to the Rambam. And therefore, the person who offers that mammon is doing a mitzvah, and he's being Moshiach Yisrael. He should be put. So the Rambam contradicts himself. On the one hand, the Rambam holds that there's a rodef b'shevi altasa, and that's the case of the Masli and the Sfina. On the other hand, the Rambam, in the case of the Anos, is unwilling to apply his own principle, namely that there's an Anos b'shevi altasa, without a Ma'aser Redifa. Why isn't this object that's being demanded by the government a rodef? And all the lives of the Jewish people in that Gegin are at stake here, are being jeopardized because the Anos says, give me that, or you're all kaputi. Let me ask you a question, and maybe this will be a little bit of a petach here to make some sense out of the Rambam. Can there be two rodfim that are being rodef the same person or same object, whatever it might be? So what would be a knee-jerk response?
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. The two rodfim, we kill both of them. But what happens if one rodef is a human being and the other rodef is an inanimate object? Can we have two rodfim? What's your knee-jerk response in that case?
I don't know why not.
I don't believe you could have two rodfim in that case. I'll tell you why. Because the human being is the rodef. He's the one who's endangering your life. It's not the object. In the case of the Sfina, it's that masui that's endangering the life. The masui memela, a me'ela, automatically is a rodef. But in the case of the Mammon of Yisrael, that Mammon is not a Rodef. What makes the Mammon into? It's the Anos, it's the guy. The guy is a human being. He's the Rodef. And the Rambam holds that you have to identify the Rodef. You can't tell me that the Hefza, the Mammon, the inanimate object, is a Rodef when there's a Meiser Adif over here. When the government is running after the Jew to kill the Jew. We have a Rodef. I wouldn't advise killing the Rodef in this case. I could tell you a story, but it's off the records. My father-in-law, as a child,
Turn off the recording.
yeah, you couldn't turn off. He was a very tough guy. I mean, he's a young child. I mean, even to this, well, he's gone, but he died during COVID. But he was a tough guy. You didn't mess around with him. My shver, when he went to the Dead Sea, for example, used to watch him. He used to use that squeezing thing. You know that you know, talk about the two black handles.
Yeah.
And he went to it, and he could hold it for who knows how long. You and I couldn't even close it. And he would challenge the Chayalim over there. You know, there would be Livnikin and all these macho guys, and he would say, okay, let's see who can hold it for 30 seconds closed. And he put a coin in between. And, you know, one after the other, because he offered them $50, you know, anyone who could hold it for 25 seconds. And as soon as one guy came up, he would take off his yarmulke and put it under the coin, you know, waiting for it to fall. And this went on for hours, and everyone found, you know, found a lot of hadah from it. And then at the end, no, Mr. Schleifer, can you do it? No problem. He was a tough guy. Anyway, so in his youth, a guy, a shegitz, started up with him and wanted to steal his lunch that his mother had prepared for him to go to cheder with a sandwich. He wasn't going to tolerate that. I'm not going to tell you what he did to this kid, but I'll just suffice it by saying that the kid's life was in the balance. And the thing is, God did a miracle and saved the boy's life, because if not, the entire Yaroslav would have been wiped out of the map.
This was in Europe.
This was in Poland.
Wow.
Had that child died, there would have been a total massacre, a pogrom. So I'm just saying, don't start up with the Goyish government. You know what I'm saying? You know, don't try to kill the Tsar who's appointed to you know, to get that object. So it could be very possible that we could offer the following interpretation of Min HaShamayim Korad Filei, according to the Rambam, Tivo Shel Olam. Tivo Shel Olam means there's no Meiser Adif. But then I would say that if you're talking about a passive Redifa without a Meiser Redifa, then you have the Rambam at the end of Chovel Mazik Perek Ches, who seems to imply that there is such a thing as a Rodev even without a Meiser Redifa, even b'shevi altas. Which means that we have to come back to your interpretation, David, that we can't consider someone a Rodev when the forces of nature are acting on him and he is totally out of control. Okay. Now, let's go back to the Rambam that we started with in Hilchos Rotzeh. How many minutes do we have? Till Myra? About 10 minutes? I want to see if we can make sense out of the Rambam. Perek Aleph, Halacha Tes. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand in the Rambam, what's the difference between Lo Hotzias Rosho and Hotzias Rosho? The Rambam seems to apply the status of Rodef to Lo Hotzias Rosho. But then, with Hotzias Rosho, the Rambam says Zet Tivo Shel Olam.
It's the Mishnah. He's
Well, the Mishnah doesn't say exactly, but the Gemara says Mishmai Karat. Anyway, the bottom line is, what exactly goes on over here in the Rambam's context? If he is a Rodev, why can't he be a Rodev even after he pops out his head? Everybody with me on that? And secondly, why does the Rambam say Hareu Kir Rodev? Either he is a Rodef or he's not a Rodef. What's this middle here Rodef?
Before he's born, maybe he's like a masa. Right. We know that's what's wrong.
And after he's born, he's not a
Before the head
masa.
comes out, he's like a masa. So that's why you're
And after, when he pops his head out, he's no longer a masa. I don't chap that. I don't catch. All right, you think about it, Dave. Let me just, if you don't mind, I'm just, as you're thinking, I'm going to be thinking.
right. Same right. But if he also holds the glass, if he also holds the glass, he's not
Two things, one demon.
you say the color comes out, he's a masa. He's a masa. And no, he's a masa.
What does it mean?
But I mean, the person can't come because
It
it's not my
means that we can see the principle of soul. Of course, I will give you let me just try something and we'll see. I may need a little bit more time, but I can't finish it under the gun here, with 5 minutes. The Rambam holds that there are two dimensions to Rodef. One dimension is saving the Nirdaf, and the other dimension is the Chiyuv Misa on the Rodef. And we said that according to Rav Huna, even in the case of a Katan, there's a Chiyuv Misa. The Rambam, just give me a minute. The Rambam is saying that before the Uber pops his head out, then there's going to be a din of Hatzalas Hanirdu. What do I mean? We can't apply the second din of a Chiyuv Rodev because Min HaShamayim Karat Filim. Zed Tivo Shalom. So, in the sense of Chiyuv Misa Rodef, we're going to establish that even before the Uber pops its head out, it's impossible to impose upon the Uber the status of a Chiyuv Misa, because it's not really a Rodef. It's Min HaShamayim Karatfi. So, what does the Rambam mean that we kill the Uber to save the mother, Kirodef? What the Rambam means to say is that we're going to apply the principle of Hatzalah. And we're going to have a situation in which we have two Hatzalas in front of us. And the Rambam is going to say that Areu Kirodev is going to tip the scale in favor of one Hatzalah at the expense of the other Hatzalah. Do you follow what I'm saying? I mean, David, you pointed out before, I mean, there are two lives that are at stake, right? It's a life buoy, and two people are fighting for the life buoy, or it's a Kiton Shel Mayim or Bekiva Ben Petura. So both of them are fighting for their lives. So the Rambam says that the Hatzalah of the mother takes precedence over the Hatzalah of the child. But that's only because we define the Ubar as what? As a Kirodif. In other words, in this battle, the Ubar is endangering the life of the mother. That's the way we see it. And therefore, Kirodif, we're going to apply the din of what? Not of the Chiyuv Misa, but the Hatzalas Hanirda. But the Rambam says, hold on. You can only do that before you would apply the principle of Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. What do I mean? The Rambam is going to reject Rashi, who says, Rashi goes very far and he says, Lav Nefeshu. The Rambam can't tolerate it. The Uber is a Nefesh. But relative to the mother, the Uber is not a Nefesh.
So think of
We'll call it a Nefesh Eino Gomor. There's a Nefesh Gomor and a Nefesh Eino Gomor. So the Rambam is going to say the following, that the halach of Hatzalah applies here, but as long as we don't violate the principle of Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh, and in this case of Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh, we say the following, the Uber is not a Nefesh Gomor until it pops its head out. Once it pops its head out, then we can't destroy one Nefesh for the sake of the other Nefesh. You'll tell me, but there's a Chiyuv Rodef. The Rambam says there's no Chiyuv Rodef, because Min Shemaim Karadfil. But before the Uber pops its head out, now I don't have a problem with Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. Why? Because I have the Nefesh of the mother, which is the Nefesh Gamur, versus the Nefesh of the Uber, which is a Nefesh Eino Gamur, and therefore we give precedence to the Nefesh Gamur above and beyond the Nefesh Eino Gamur. But the Rambam says we have to add one important point, and that is that we view the Uber as endangering the life of the mother. And that's called Harehu Kirodef. So when the Rambam says Harehu Kirodef, which din of Rodef is the Rambam willing to apply to the Uber? The din of Hatzalas Hanirdaf. But the Rambam says there's a limit to that. You can't apply the din of Hatzalas Hanirdaf when you smack yourself against another force, which is called Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. So what that means is that once the Uber pops its head out, and you want to now apply the principle of Hatzalas Hanirda, you can't do that because the Uber is now no longer an Uber. What is the status of the Uber after it pops its head out? It's a Nefesh Gomer. Once a Nefesh Gomer, it's on the same level as the mother, and therefore we're going to apply the principle of Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. So that I can't do an act of Hatzalah unless there's no Nefesh Gomer. If there's no Nefesh Gomer, then I can apply the principle of Kirodef in the sense of Hatzalah. I'm going to apply the Hatzalah of the mother and therefore destroy the life of the Uber because relative to the mother, it's not a Tchias Nefesh. And that's what the Rambam calls Harehu Kirodef.
It's 8:28.
Okay.
You asked me to tell you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
so why we don't need tomorrow's Shemaim. Unless it's Shemaim Korot.
Again, if you didn't say Mishamayim Karat Filei, then we would kill the Uber even after it pops its nefesh. Ain't Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. Well, in the case of a Rodef, we don't apply Ain't Dochin Nefesh. And the Rodef is Chayiv Misa, as we saw in Rav Huna in the case of a Katan. The answer is an Uber is not like a Katan, and it's Tivo Shalom. If it's Tivo Shalom, there's no din of Chayiv Misa. All we can do is apply the halach of Hatzalah. And if we're applying the halach of Hatzalah, then we have to decide, well, what about Ain't Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh? And that's where the Rambam is going to make the distinction between the Uber before it pops its head out and after it pops its head. Okay, but we know that we'll go over this next week, and I'll give you a week to think about it, mull it over, and tell me if you think it makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, Chag Sameach, everyone. Thanks.
by next Monday, we're going to America for 3 weeks. So,
Ooh, that's painful.
yeah, it is. It was some COVID.